the lie you were taught about yourself. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. Have you ever done something and immediately thought, that wasn't really me? Have you ever felt anger, jealousy, desire, cruelty, or darkness rise inside you and rush to push it down, explain it away, or pretend it never happened? If so, you're not broken. You're not evil. You're not weak. You're human. And according to Carl Jung, that reaction, that urge to deny, suppress, or hide those parts of yourself is exactly what gives those parts power over you. This video is not about motivation. It's not about self-love. It's not about positivity. This video is about the shadow. And if you misunderstand Jung Shadow, it will quietly run your life from behind scenes. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear may change how you see your anger, your relationships, your addictions, your ambition, and even your morality. What Jung meant by the shadow and what most people get wrong. When people hear the shadow, they imagine something dramatic. Evil, violence, immorality. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. Carl Jung described the shadow as everything you are, but refuse to acknowledge. Not just bad traits, not just dark urges, but your suppressed confidence, your buried aggression, your denied ambition, your hunger for power, your capacity for dominance. The shadow is not only what society rejects, it is what you were taught to reject in yourself. And here's the shocking truth most people never hear. The shadow doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It waits, and then it controls you indirectly. Why good people are often the most dangerous. This is where Jung becomes deeply unsettling. The people who claim to be purely good, harmless, harshly moral, are often the ones most possessed by their shadow. Why? Because whatever you refuse to face internally leaks out externally. Repressed anger becomes passive aggression. Repressed dominance becomes manipulation. Repressed desire becomes obsession. Repressed cruelty becomes moral superiority. Jung warned, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. If you don't confront your shadow consciously, it will express itself unconsciously. And when that happens, you don't control it. The shadow in modern life. Why this matters today. Look around. People are constantly offended, easily triggered, addicted to validation, morally outraged online, obsessed with exposing others. This is not enlightenment. This is collective shadow projection. Instead of saying, this darkness exists in me, people say, that darkness is out there. So they attack, cancel, judge, shame. Jung believed society collapses not because of evil, but because people refuse to admit they are capable of it. And here's the part most viewers don't expect. Backhand index pointing right, your shadow is not your enemy. Your ignorance of it is. Why you must keep watching. In the next, we will break down how the shadow secretly controls your decisions. Why denial makes you weak instead of moral. How powerful people integrate their shadow instead of fighting it. And how ignoring it makes you manipulable. By the end of this video, you won't just understand Jung's shadow. You'll see how it has shaped your past failures, your relationships, your fear of power, and your self-sabotage. This is not comfortable knowledge, but it is liberating. If this already feels uncomfortably accurate, make sure you stay until the end, because most people turn away right before the truth gets personal. And if you want more deep psychology like this, not watered down, not motivational fluff, subscribe now. You're going to need this perspective later. In the next, we go deeper. You'll learn how the shadow is formed, not by trauma alone, but by parenting, culture, morality, and praise. And once you see how it was built, you'll understand why most people never escape it. The moment you learn to hide yourself. No one is born with a shadow. That's the first uncomfortable truth. You weren't born broken. You weren't born dark. You weren't born divided. The shadow is learned, and it begins forming the very first moment you receive a message like this. That part of you is not acceptable, not remembered consciously, not dramatic, often subtle. How the shadow is formed, Jung's core theory. Carl Jung believed the shadow develops through a simple but brutal process. You express something natural. Authority rejects it. You suppress it to survive. That's it. No trauma required. No abuse required. Just conditioning. A child who expresses anger is told, "Good boys don't get angry." A child who shows dominance is told, "Stop being difficult." A child who seeks attention is told, "Don't be selfish." So the child learns a silent rule. If I want love, approval, and safety, I must hide this. That hidden part doesn't die. It sinks, and it becomes the shadow. Why? Good parenting often creates the strongest shadows. Here's the part most people resist hearing. The shadow is not created only by bad parents. It is often created by well-meaning ones. Parents don't say, "Suppress your soul." They say, "Be polite, be humble, be nice, don't cause trouble, think of others first." Each of these sounds moral. Each of these sounds harmless. But taken too far, they teach a child one dangerous lesson. Your instincts are wrong. So aggression goes underground. Ambition hides. Sexuality becomes shame. Confidence becomes arrogance. The child becomes good, but the shadow grows hungry. The morality trap. Why the shadow is strongest in virtuous people. Jung warned about this exact phenomenon. The more a person identifies with being moral, spiritual, righteous, harmless, the more unconscious their shadow becomes. Why? Because the ego says, anything denied seeks expression. So instead of honest aggression, you get passive aggression, manipulation, moralschamming, superiority. This is how people hurt others while believing they're right. And this is where the shadow becomes dangerous, not to others first, but to you. The shadow does not want to destroy you. This is where Jung's work is misunderstood. The shadow is not evil. It is unfinished. It contains instincts you never learned to use responsibly, power you were never taught to control, traits you were never allowed to integrate. So instead of becoming strength, they become sabotage. Jung wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. Not because it is bad, but because it demands honesty. And honesty is psychologically expensive." How the shadow starts controlling your adult life. By adulthood, the shadow no longer looks like a part of you. It looks like sudden emotional reactions, self-sabotaging decisions, attraction to toxic people, compulsive behaviors, irrational rage or guilt. You don't say, "My shadow is acting." You say, "I don't know why I did that. That's not like me. I wasn't thinking. It just happened." That's the shadow, acting without your permission. And here's the part that should make you uneasy. Back-end index pointing right, the shadow does not disappear with age. Back-end index pointing right, it becomes more strategic. If ignored, it doesn't scream. It whispers. It influences who you trust, who you resent, who you envy, who you obey. And most people never realize it. If this feels personal, don't look away. Most people stop learning right here. Because facing the origin of the shadow means questioning everything you were praised for. Stay with this. And if this kind of psychological depth matters to you, subscribe now, because what comes next is where most people psychologically tap out. In the next, we expose something even more disturbing. How the shadow doesn't just hide inside you, but projects itself onto other people. Why you irrationally hate certain people, idolize others, feel triggered without knowing why. The illusion that keeps you blind. Let's start with a brutal question. Have you ever met someone who instantly annoyed you, and you couldn't explain why? Not because they harmed you, not because they threatened you, just something about them irritated you. Or maybe the opposite. You admired someone obsessively, put them on a pedestal, defended them without logic. According to Carl Jung, both reactions come from the same place. Your shadow. What Jung meant by projection. Projection is one of the most dangerous psychological mechanisms because it feels like perception, not psychology. Jung defined projection as this: seeing disowned parts of yourself in other people, not metaphorically, literally. Anything you refuse to acknowledge internally, your mind looks for externally. If you repress aggression, you see aggressive people everywhere. If you repress selfishness, you see selfish people everywhere. If you repress desire, you see immoral people everywhere. Your shadow doesn't stay silent. It moves outward. Why projection feels so real. This is why projection is powerful and dangerous. When a shadow projects, it doesn't say, "This is about me." It says, "This is about them." Your emotions feel justified. Your judgment feels moral. Your reactions feel correct. That's why people will swear, "I just hate fake people. I can't stand arrogant people. I despise manipulative people," without realizing they're often reacting to their own denied traits. Jung warned, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves, but only if you're brave enough to look. The two types of projection, most people only know one. Most people think projection is only negative. That's incomplete. There are two forms. 1. Negative projection, hate, trigger, contempt. You despise traits you were never allowed to express. If you were punished for anger, you will hate angry people. If you were shamed for confidence, you will resent confident people. If you're taught obedience, you will fear dominant people. Your shadow says, "I was never allowed to be this." So when you see it in others, it burns. 2. Positive projection, idolization, worship, obsession. This one is more subtle and more dangerous. You admire traits you abandoned. You idolize leaders, rebels, confident figures, dominant personalities, because they live what you suppressed. You say, "They're special." Jung would say, "No, they're carrying your potential." When you over-admire someone, you're often looking at your unlived life. Why projection makes you easy to manipulate. Here's where this gets dark. If someone understands projection, they can control you. Manipulators intuitively exploit this. They mirror your shadow, provoke your triggers, activate guilt or admiration. That's how influence works. You think you're reacting to them, but you're reacting to yourself. This is why Jung believed unconscious people are easy to control, because they don't know what inside them is being pulled. Modern examples, why this matters now. Social media thrives on projection. Outrage culture, cancel culture, hero worship, public shaming, all shadow dynamics. People aren't reacting to facts. They're reacting to unintegrated parts of themselves. And the more unconscious the shadow, the more extreme the reaction. That's why discussions feel impossible. You're not arguing ideas. You're colliding shadows. Here's the truth most people never hear. Backhand index pointing right. If someone has an extreme emotional reaction to you, it's rarely about you. It's about what you represent. And the same applies in reverse. If someone triggers you deeply, that's not random. That's information. If this is clicking, stay with the video. Most people turn away when they realize how much of their personality is actually unconscious defense. And if you want more psychology like this raw, uncomfortable, and honest, subscribe. You won't hear this explained this way anywhere else. The shadow doesn't want exposure, it wants expression. This is where things shift. The shadow doesn't disappear by awareness alone. It wants acknowledgement, responsibility, direction. When ignored, it projects. When faced, it integrates. And integration is power. The enemy you call bad luck. Most people think their problems come from bad timing, bad people, or bad circumstances. Carl Jung would tell you something far more disturbing. Much of what you call bad luck is your shadow acting through you. Not consciously, not deliberately, but consistently. Self-sabotage is not laziness. It is shadow control. People sabotage themselves because success activates the shadow. Success requires traits you were taught to suppress. Assertiveness, dominance, ambition, selfish focus, and emotional coldness. When you get close to winning, your psyche panics. Not because you cannot succeed, but because success forces you to become someone you were told not to be. That is when the shadow intervenes. How the shadow sabotages you without you noticing. The shadow rarely destroys your life dramatically. It works quietly. It shows up as procrastination right before progress. Picking the wrong partner repeatedly, saying the wrong thing at the worst moment, impulsive decisions that erase momentum, and accidental mistakes. You say, I do not know why I did that. Jung would say, yes, you do. You just do not want to know why success feels dangerous to your psyche. Your identity was built around being agreeable, harmless, and accepted. Power requires boundaries, confrontation, emotional risk, and inequality. When success approaches, the shadow whispers, if you go further, you will lose love. And your psyche chooses safety over expansion. This is why people self-sabotage relationships, careers, and opportunities right before they break through. The shadow and addiction. Jung believed addiction was not the problem, it was the symptom. Addictions are shadow compensation. When parts of you are denied expression, pleasure becomes compulsive, control becomes obsession, numbness becomes comfort. The shadow says if you will not live fully, at least feel something. Discipline alone often fails because you are not battling a habit, you are battling a repressed life force. Why positive thinking makes this worse. Modern self-help often fails here. Telling someone to stay positive, raise your vibration, or focus on the light does not integrate the shadow. It strengthens it because denial feeds it. Jung warned, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. The more you pretend to be pure, the more destructive the shadow becomes. Here is the turning point. Your shadow is not sabotaging you because it hates you. It sabotages you because it wants to be included. Ignored power becomes destructive power. Integrated power becomes controlled strength. The price of ignoring the shadow. Unintegrated shadows do not just damage individuals. They destroy relationships, organizations, and societies because unconscious people do not take responsibility. They project, they blame, they justify. Justification is the shadow's favorite hiding place. In the next, we enter dangerous territory. You will learn how powerful individuals use their shadow consciously, why strength without shadow awareness becomes tyranny, and why true power requires confronting your darkness. Why most people never integrate their shadow. Here is a truth that shocks most people. The shadow is not inherently evil. It is unfinished, undeveloped, and often denied. Most people spend their lives pretending it does not exist. They focus on being good, polite, moral, or socially acceptable. They think avoiding darkness keeps them safe. Carl Jung warned that this avoidance comes at a terrible cost. The shadow grows stronger when ignored. It expresses itself in ways you do not control. Sudden emotional outbursts, sabotaged relationships, irrational decisions, compulsive behaviors, and unexplained guilt. The more you deny it, the more it shapes your life from behind the scenes. The difference between awareness and integration. Many people claim they are aware of their shadow. They read books, watch videos, or meditate. Awareness alone is not integration. Awareness is noticing, while integration is consciously accepting, directing, and using those suppressed traits. Integration is not easy. It is uncomfortable. It forces you to confront impulses, desires, and emotions that society, parents, or culture told you were wrong. Anger, ambition, desire for dominance, selfishness, even cruelty. These traits exist in everyone. Ignoring them weakens you. Integrating them makes you strategically powerful. How the shadow becomes power. When integrated, the shadow transforms from a source of sabotage to a source of strength. This is not metaphor. This is psychological reality. Anger becomes focus and assertiveness. Ambition becomes strategic action instead of envy. Desire becomes creativity instead of self-shame. Cruelty becomes discipline and boundaries instead of emotional harm. Powerful individuals throughout history understood this principle. They did not deny their darkness. They mastered it. They directed it toward achievement, influence, and dominance, not unconscious destruction. Shadow integration in everyday life. You do not have to be famous or historically powerful to use this. Shadow integration works in daily life, setting boundaries without guilt, confronting uncomfortable truths in relationships, facing fears that hold you back from ambition. using suppressed emotions to fuel creativity, discipline, and clarity. When you integrate your shadow, the energy that once sabotaged you now works for you. The same intensity that caused emotional explosions now drives results. The same hidden desires that caused envy now become focused motivation. The psychological technique of shadow mastery. Carl Jung and modern psychologists agree. Integration requires structured confrontation and conscious reflection. Identify triggers, situations, or people that evoke strong reactions. Recognize the unacknowledged part of yourself behind that reaction. Own it. Do not rationalize, justify, or blame. Channel it. Transform it into deliberate action or constructive awareness. Observe the outcome. Refine your control over time. This is the method the most influential people use, knowingly or not. It is dark psychology in practice, not theory. If you think mastering your shadow is optional, think again. Ignoring it guarantees external control, emotional sabotage, and unconscious projection onto others. Integration is the difference between living unconsciously and living strategically. This is why awareness alone is not enough. You must confront, channel, and master. If this is resonating, do not skip the next modules. The final sections will reveal how your shadow influences who manipulates you, who you manipulate, and how to reclaim total psychological control. Subscribe now if you are serious about mastering your mind. In the next, we will dive into shadow and influence. You will learn how the shadow allows others to manipulate you without your knowledge, and how understanding it lets you control not only yourself but situations and relationships strategically. How your shadow opens the door to manipulation. Here is something most people never realize. Your shadow does not only affect you internally, it also affects how others perceive you, interact with you, and control you, often without you knowing. People who understand dark psychology exploit this unconsciously or consciously. They know that the traits you deny, the impulses you hide, and the emotions you suppress are precisely the points through which you are most vulnerable. Your shadow is not just a personal challenge. It is a psychological key that others can use to influence you. Why denial makes you controllable? Think about it. If you're unaware of your suppressed anger, you might overreact or freeze when someone pushes your buttons. If you deny your desire for power, you will defer to others who act boldly. If you refuse to acknowledge your selfishness, you will constantly give in, feel drained, and allow manipulation. This is why ignorance of the shadow creates invisible chains. You might think you are free. You might think you make rational choices. But in reality, your unacknowledged parts dictate your behavior, and others can see it like a map. The psychology of projection and manipulation. Remember projection? Your shadow projects onto others, and it also draws projection back at you. Manipulative people intuitively notice your shadow traits. They see what you deny. They trigger it. They exploit it. Someone triggers your guilt. They know you suppress anger. Someone plays on your desire for approval. They know you hide ambition. Someone manipulates you emotionally. They know your fear of rejection. You are reacting to yourself, but they are controlling the reaction. This is the cruel genius of influence. Shadow awareness as a defense mechanism. The good news is that understanding your shadow creates immunity. Once you identify your hidden traits, you recognize manipulation attempts immediately. You see triggers for what they are, not as external truths. You feel emotions fully without automatically reacting. You can consciously choose your responses instead of being hijacked. Jung would argue that conscious integration is the ultimate form of psychological armor. Real-life example. Think of someone who constantly criticizes you. If you feel defensive, anxious, or ashamed, it is likely because your shadow holds denial about that exact quality. Awareness allows you to pause, reflect, and respond strategically instead of reacting automatically. The same applies to social influence, workplace politics, and personal relationships. Those who master their shadow see the strings being pulled and can act instead of being acted upon. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Most people live their entire lives unknowingly influenced by others simply because they refuse to confront their own shadow. When you integrate the shadow, suddenly the world stops controlling you. Suddenly, you see people's tactics for what they are. Suddenly, you are no longer the pawn. You are the strategist. If you're starting to realize how much control your shadow holds over your life and decisions, stay with the video. The next module will reveal how to transform shadow mastery into influence over yourself and your environment, a skill few people ever achieve. In the next, we will explore shadow mastery applied to real life. You will learn how powerful people use this knowledge to influence, lead, and dominate while remaining psychologically balanced. From shadow awareness to shadow mastery. By now, you understand what the shadow is, how it forms, how it sabotages your life, and how it allows others to manipulate you. Now comes the step most people never reach: shadow mastery. Shadow mastery is not just about self-awareness. It is about taking your hidden impulses, denied desires, and suppressed traits and channeling them deliberately to achieve control over yourself, your environment, and your relationships. This is where dark psychology meets practical power, where theory becomes strategy, where hidden darkness becomes your greatest asset. The first step to shadow mastery: honesty with yourself. Mastery begins with brutal honesty. Ask yourself, what traits do I deny in myself? What emotions am I afraid of expressing? What desires have I suppressed because society, culture, or morality told me they were wrong? Once you identify them, stop hiding. Stop rationalizing. Stop pretending. Your shadow does not want punishment. It wants recognition. It wants expression under control. The second step: channeling the shadow into action. Unchecked darkness destroys. Controlled darkness empowers. Anger becomes assertive communication. Ambition becomes strategic decision-making. Desire becomes creative productivity. Dominance becomes influence and leadership. This is the art of transformation. You're no longer a victim of unconscious impulses. You are their master. The third step: using shadow awareness to influence others. Here is the part most people do not realize. Your shadow, once integrated, gives you psychological insight into others. You can see who is projecting, who is hiding weaknesses, who is emotionally manipulative. And once you see it, you can respond strategically instead of reactively. Influence is not about manipulation for selfish gain alone. It is about understanding dynamics, predicting behavior, and guiding outcomes. Shadow mastery in relationships. Relationships are a battlefield of projections. Most people argue over illusions created by their shadow. When you master your shadow, you stop reacting to triggers automatically. You identify unconscious projections from others. You maintain emotional control. You guide conversations and interactions deliberately. This does not make you cold. It makes you aware and untouchable. Shadow mastery in career and ambition. In the professional world, unintegrated shadows lead to sabotage, missed opportunities, and conflict. With mastery, ambition is balanced with strategy. Assertiveness becomes influence, not aggression. Desire for recognition drives productivity, not envy. Leadership is exercised without unconscious emotional swings. Your shadow transforms from a liability to a competitive advantage. The final truth: shadow integration is freedom. The shadow is not your enemy. Ignorance is. When integrated, your shadow enhances self-discipline, amplifies emotional intelligence, strengthens decision-making, improves relationships, protects you from manipulation. This is not mystical. This is psychology applied at the highest level. The uncomfortable reality: most people will never face their shadow. They will blame the world, justify their weaknesses, and live unconsciously. You now know better. You have seen the mechanics, the psychology, and the strategies. The question is, will you integrate your shadow and become the master of your life? Or continue letting it run you from behind the scenes. If you are serious about mastering your mind, your emotions, and your influence, subscribe now for more deep, dark psychology insights. Like and share to challenge someone you care about. Comment below, which part of your shadow are you finally ready to face? This knowledge is uncomfortable, but power always comes with discomfort.